listener production.
Hi, Sasha Barbagat with you. Welcome to The Briefing. The world's most expensive painting ever sold at auction could be on display soon. But it's not without hot debate in the art world for its authenticity, its ownership, its cost, and where it might be shown after 7 years in storage. On today's Deep Dive, we explore why Leonardo da Vinci's Salvator Mundi plus a cashed-up Saudi prince equals a world of controversy. First, though, let's get into the headlines with Helen Smith. It is Thursday, August 29.
Bonjour, Sasha.
Oh, bonjour.
It's time for some more late nights and early mornings with the 17th Paralympic Games opening ceremony currently underway in Paris. Now, there's a few changes to the opening ceremony. Unlike the Olympics, the athletes weren't cruising down the Seine. Instead, the parade took place in the heart of Paris at the Place de la Concorde and Champs-Élysées. We have 160 athletes representing Australia across 17 different events in Paris during the next 11 days of competition, and 61 of those athletes will be making their Paralympic debut. Our best chances of some bulk medals are expected in athletics, swimming and cycling. And if you want to catch the games, they will be on during the early hours of the morning again, so set those alarms. Now, Paris has never hosted a Paralympics before, and there has actually been a lot of praise around how accessible they have made the city. But this morning, a user on X or Twitter posted a photo of a viewing platform, and the post said, "I'm a wheelchair user in Paris for the hashtag Paralympics 2024 opening ceremony. The wheelchair viewing platform is entirely taken up by non-wheelchair users." And the photo attached sees the platform that is full of what seemingly does look like able-bodied people just sitting on it and taking it up. So, yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the Games kind of works around people living with disability and, spectators that also want to enjoy the Games.
I read as well that there were 2 million tickets sold out of a possible 2.5 million, which is really cool. It means that the Paralympians are going to have really great crowds, which is really awesome to see, especially like we mentioned with the Olympics after Tokyo, where no one could go and watch them. So I think it's going to be a really great spectacle in Paris. And look, we are going to get right into the nuts and bolts of everything Paralympics this afternoon. We're speaking with 3-time gold medal Paralympian Carol Cook. So make sure you have a listen to that. Changing pace now, Israel has launched an attack on the occupied West Bank, killing 9 Palestinians. It is the largest assault seen on the territory in months. The IDF is looking to stamp out groups of militant Palestinian fighters in the area. Israeli forces raided the 2 cities of Jenin and Tulkarm using helicopters and drones. Now, the West Bank is disputed territory. Along with Gaza, it is part of the state of Palestine that was promised by the British back in 1948, but it has been occupied by Israel since 1967. Both Palestinians and Israelis live in the territory, with clashes between the groups ramping up since October 7. So this is just another example of where Israel is currently fighting all these wars. It's got Gaza, it's got the West Bank, it's got Iran and southern Lebanon with Hezbollah. So it's worth noting as well, with ceasefire talks, we have been looking at this over the last couple of weeks. They are continuing again. Hamas and Israel are apparently at the moment trading blame for a lack of progress. So one side says it's the other side's fault and vice versa. The United States is continuing to express optimism that a ceasefire can be reached.
Donald Trump has blamed Joe Biden and Kamala Harris for the attempt on his life at a rally in Pennsylvania last month. The former president sat down with none other than Dr. Phil, making these unfounded claims.
I'm the opponent. Look, they were weaponizing government against me. They brought in the whole DOJ to try and get me. They weren't too interested in my health and safety.
The incident saw the head of the Secret Service forced to stand down, with many labelling the shooting a huge failure in their protection.
Yeah, the Secret Service also soon after revealed that Trump's security detail had complained about a lack of security, and the Secret Service acknowledged that they did deny some requests, but there has been no evidence that Biden and Harris were involved or had interfered in the Secret Service's arrangements. So these are pretty massive claims to make by Trump. I mean, we shouldn't be surprised, but yeah, leveling the blame at Harris and Biden seems really out of touch at this point in time. Look, meantime, people have dug up more dirt on JD Vance. This is Trump's running mate, the Republican nomination for vice president. Now, you might remember a couple of weeks back, we did a deep dive on it as well, talking about how he'd made these comments about childless cat ladies and how they shouldn't have a say in what happens in a country because they're not in charge of the future. All they're doing is existing and then they're going to die and they won't have a legacy. He has also taken aim at people without children, trying to make policies about kids. Now, I think he says it best himself, so I'll leave it to JD.
So many of the leaders of the left, and I hate to be so personal about this, but they're people without kids trying to brainwash the minds of our children. And that really disorients me and it really disturbs me. Randy Weingarten, who's the head of the most powerful teachers union in the country, she doesn't have a single child. If she wants to brainwash and destroy the minds of children, she should have some of her own and leave ours the hell alone.
So Randy Weingarten, who he spoke about there, she's the head of the teachers union in the US. These comments were made in 2021 at a Christian forum, right? Mm-hmm. So they're not recent, they're old. People are just digging up this old stuff from JD. But Randy is the head of the teachers union. She doesn't have children herself. And he's saying, hey, you shouldn't be allowed to brainwash my children with policies about, whatever, because you don't have kids yourself. So yeah, that one's being dragged up. Kamala Harris's campaign reposted the audio as well. So I think he's going to get some more crap for that.
I do. And also, if you haven't checked out Kamala's team's Kamala HQ on TikTok, they have the best, funniest videos that they dig up some of this audio. They've been putting compilations together and it's hilarious. So if you need a bit of a laugh, go check that out. And a new study is suggesting dogs really can communicate with us with words. Researchers at the University of California have been looking into soundboards that have become popular with some pet influencers online.
Okay, I come talk. Hey, come talk. I come talk.
Now, what you just heard there was a dog pressing down onto buttons, and the voice that you were hearing out of those buttons is actually the owner's voice. So words like walk, treat, and outside have been recorded by the owner and then put onto these soundboards. But debate has swirled over whether these pooches are really responding to audio from the device or they're simply reacting to cues based on their owner's behaviour.
Yeah, so the study has found that dogs trained to use these devices do respond to the pre-recorded words just as they do with spoken words. Now, this study is in its very early stages and the lead researcher has acknowledged that, but it is a start. Now, I'm a proud dog mum. I've said it before on this podcast. I did consider getting these buttons for my dog. So you can buy the buttons in single packs and you record your voice saying, what you want. And then the idea is you put it on the floor for them and they can wander over. So they can tell you, they can say, I need to go outside, I need to go to the loo. Or, can we go for a walk? I'm bored, or, But I realized that with my dog, if he did learn to use these, he's completely food motivated. So he would just press treat over and over, treat, 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 treat. Or he'd press walk over and over, walk, 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 walk. So I decided against it. But there is genuine debate about this. So the fact that there's a study, I think is really cool.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting as well. And personally, I believe that dogs can communicate with us. I'd love it if they could talk. So I'm all for this. Put the research out there, keep going with it. And yeah, we'll update you on what it says.
Yeah, absolutely. Helen, thank you so much for being here for today's headlines. Next up, it's your deep dive looking into the mystery surrounding this Leonardo da Vinci painting. We're going to bring you all the latest drama out of the art world.
Salvator Mundi is the most expensive painting sold at auction, selling for $450 million to Saudi Arabian Prince Mohamed bin Salman back in 2017. But the painting doesn't come without controversy. Dubbed the male Mona Lisa, Salvator Mundi is attributed to Leonardo da Vinci, but not all art experts agree that the work is by the famous artist. So after around 7 years of the painting being in storage, it's been reported that the prince has plans to make the painting the centre of what some have called the Saudi Louvre, creating a tourism attraction for the West. But could this be a form of art washing, where Saudi Arabia is using art like sport to distract from negative perceptions of the country? Professor Anne Dunlop is the Herald Chair in Fine Arts from the University of Melbourne. And thanks for joining us on The Briefing. How did Salvator Mundi become the world's most expensive painting?
Well, that's a short and a long story. And depending who you're talking to, it's either the best marketing in recent art world history or, the fact that Leonardo is the most interesting, important artist who ever lived. Essentially, what has happened is a painting that was kind of rediscovered. We don't know much about it before the beginning of the 20th century, but it pops up in a collection in the UK. Then it is sold to a couple who seem to have been on their honeymoon from Baton Rouge, Louisiana, who have it in their living room for many years. It gets sold at auction in, I think it's 2005 in New Orleans, is bought by a consortium of dealers. It then has this kind of exhibition history and famously becomes the world's most expensive painting. So it's partly the kind of story of this thing emerging sort of from almost complete obscurity to world fame, but it's also just the sheer price and rarity of things associated with Leonardo.
Yeah, so how did someone discover that, hang on a sec, this painting might be worth more than we thought?
Depending who you talk to, there are about a dozen, maybe, paintings by Leonardo da Vinci that survive. He didn't like to paint, that's clear. We're told that already, people not long after his own lifetime record that, and certainly doesn't seem to have done it all that willingly. So in every case, what happens, these things are not signed. In every case, what happens is essentially you get a group of experts, people who've studied things, who agree more or less that it might entirely, might in part, or might not at all be by Leonardo da Vinci. And part of the story around the Salvator Mundi is that there has been this kind of moments of consensus that he might have had a part in it. Other experts absolutely flatly disagree. So it's always, with something like this, it's always a case of who you're willing to believe and who you think has the best sense of what his style looked like.
Yeah, so it has created a bit of controversy around that. Some people say Prince Mohamed bin Salman might have wasted $500 million nearly on this painting. But then, as you said, others agree that it's real. What's the process of knowing if something is a real Da Vinci?
Basic things that are done are to sort of check that the wood that it's painted on is from the right era, that the pigments that are used are from the right period. There are technical things that can be checked, but all they tell you is that it has areas on it or, it was painted on wood that's from the right time and place. So it really does come down, a lot of it, to try to check it with things like the Mona Lisa or whatever that are accepted by everybody and where we know much more the sort of provenance story, where it's been since Leonardo's own lifetime and his own death. And then it's almost like a kind of mix and match exercise to try to test it against what you think Leonardo might look like and what the painting in front of us looks like. One of the issues with the Salvator Mundi is it's really badly damaged. So you think of it almost as visual noise. You're trying to look at something that's in pretty bad condition.
Are there any ethical issues that arise with private owners holding and owning paintings such as this?
Yeah, this is a big discussion, right? There are a lot of things that have survived because they were loved and treasured by private owners, and there are a lot of things that do survive still in private ownership. But there is always the hope that with things that are of kind of real interest and value, that they might end up in public collections. And that's one of the justifications for big public museums, right? That they do allow much, much wider range of people to actually see and enjoy things.
Speaking of the public seeing a painting like this, the owner, Prince Mohamed bin Salman, has hinted at an intended Saudi Louvre that he wants to create and build in Saudi Arabia. Do you think that this could actually come to life. The director of the British Museum resigned recently and is now working in Saudi Arabia, working apparently on the project. And there's a few other quite prominent art directors from London who are also working over there on it. Could we see this Saudi Louvre come to life?
Yeah, for the last a number of years now, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia has had a very ambitious program of creating new museums, with some museum that would be about world cultures or world heritage maybe being part of that. So there have been a lot of rumors around this. It has kind of been publicly announced. A Spanish architect was identified to sort of be behind the build. And the assumption and the rumors around this have always been that one of the reasons for acquiring the painting in the first place was to sort of encourage people to draw them to come and see this, just as people go to the Louvre in Paris. I think there's been so much curiosity and interest in where this painting has been since it was bought. And that, there have been all sorts of rumors about that too, that it was on private yachts, that it was in pre-ports, etc. So every couple of years, a story sort of comes up about where it might or might not be going. And the earlier version, when it was first bought, was about the idea that it would go to the Louvre, but in Abu Dhabi. So that didn't happen. So all of it has to be taken with some kind of sense of, well, that's the story we're getting now.
Yeah, and that idea of drawing, hopefully, maybe more Westerners to Saudi to visit and to build tourism, some experts are calling this a form of art washing, similar to the sports washing going on in Saudi with the F1 and football players being paid enormous amounts of money. Is this Saudi Louvre plan part of a tourism ploy for Westerners?
Again, it's a real question, I think, in the art world, right? Like, you've maybe heard of the Bilbao effect, this idea that if you create this kind of world-class museum by a famous architect or, with unbelievable collections, people will actually make the trip to go see it. And it's been happening in a lot of different places, including a number of the Gulf states. So it's not a new idea that's kind of being tried out here. But there is always this sort of discussion of whether some places are more legitimate owners than others. Although I would point out that Leonardo in his own time was really unconcerned with who he worked for. Like, he worked for Cesare Borgia and others. He was not a guy he was either very pragmatic or very cynical about his own kind of dealings with the rich and powerful, including some pretty dodgy figures. So I don't think he would have worried about it one way or another.
And speaking of art washing and works not being where they originally were, does the West have a leg to stand on? The British Museum has been called the largest receiver of stolen goods by The Guardian, and we've got shows like Stuff the British Stole. Is there really an argument that can be had?
Yeah, this is enormous, right? These collections that were created to be these sort of universal museums have been discussed always in terms of the public good. I said a few moments ago that, it allows people to come and see things they otherwise wouldn't if they were in private ownership. But of course, a lot of these objects have reached different collections, sometimes in ways that were considered legitimate at the time, but we absolutely wouldn't allow anymore. So it's a big open question around a lot of the kind of big museum collections and the idea of these big kind of world museums more broadly. So there have been accusations sort of exactly of that, the people in Europe and the West are sort of pointing figures and they don't have the right to do so.
So speaking back to the Saudi Louvre, do you know, or has there been any other rumours of any other iconic artworks that the Prince might be trying to acquire for the museum?
There, I think, are always rumours about this, right? Because one of the sort of shocks in some ways that's built into this story is just the idea of having kind of unlimited resources to buy things, right? And how that might also change things around the art market more generally. Again, that's not new. Like when the Getty Museum in Los Angeles started acquiring artworks, they were accused of exactly the same thing. So I think when people are trying to buy these extraordinary kind of artworks, part of what they do is be very, very careful that rumors are kept as low-key as possible, because it just serves to drive things up. So we're not hearing a lot about that, but there are always questions about what might or might not be on a wish list.
Thank you so much, Anne, for joining us on The Briefing.
Thanks for having me.
That was Professor Anne Dunlop from the University of Melbourne. Thanks for listening to this episode of The Briefing. That's it for now. But before you go, we'd love it if you could share this ep with someone else you think might enjoy it too. And if you want to keep up with our other content, you can check us out on Instagram at The Briefing Podcast or on TikTok and YouTube. Just search for Listener Newsroom. We'll be back in your feed with another ep this afternoon. I'm Helen Smith. See you next time.
Listener.